All right. Welcome everybody to our session today. I'm going to share my screen here. All right. Okay. Welcome everybody. Thank you for attending today. We're talking today about cloud infrastructure, and I am trying to approach this from a very strategic perspective and thinking about it as an organization, the needs and some of the business needs that cloud infrastructure can solve. And so that's kind of the approach I'm going to take, although I am going to show you some details about and some deep dive into specifics of how PeopleSoft works on Oracle Cloud infrastructure. And so I hope to share a couple of my thoughts on it, and hope you'll learn something. All right, so my name is Cameron McClurg. I am Managing Director with spearmsd. I'm out of Seattle office. I joined spearmsd a couple of years ago. Prior to that, I was working within several organizations doing PeopleSoft work and being really a user and manager of system support and implementation teams. Being that I have that background, I really approach this now on the consulting side as I would if I was still an internal employee managing and using PeopleSoft. And so I really have that perspective that kind of makes my perspective a little bit unique. I do have certifications of PeopleSoft and OCI, as well as Hyperion that I did some support for many years. So I do have a good set of experience across PeopleSoft and other Oracle products. spearmsd, at this point, I'd imagine you probably know a little bit about us. We've been all over the place in this conference and been doing a lot of presentations. We do a little bit of everything with respect to PeopleSoft. So we truly went all in on PeopleSoft a couple years ago when some of the partners were kind of moving away from PeopleSoft. We said, we're all in on PeopleSoft. Let's do everything, whether it's administration and managed services or support, new implementations, training, hosting OCI, PTF, test and service, all of that stuff with respect to, as well as licensing. And we are partnered with Oracle University as well. So we really do everything we can with respect to PeopleSoft. That's really our thing. You shouldn't have any other needs that we can't provide you in the PeopleSoft space. We went all in on OCI a couple of years ago and really said this is the path to helping people invest in a cloud strategy while not necessarily needing to get off of PeopleSoft. And so we really went all in, and this year we're pleased to be involved and included in the 2021 Gartner Guide for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure Professional and Managed Services. We're very pleased about that, and we do have our specializations, of course, in OCI and PeopleSoft. We really do a little bit of everything, as I mentioned. This is just another little graphic about it, but really today we're focusing on just the OCI pieces, which is essentially OCI or cloud hosting and emerging technology. So that's kind of what we're focusing on today. If you are still looking for more sessions, we still have got a lot. We're about halfway through the agenda for the overall conference, and very happy to be very well represented across all different the pillars, both HCM and financials, as well as both technical and functional sessions. So we really have a lot with respect to PeopleSoft, but I encourage you to join us for any of these remaining sessions. And I do have a chatbot session tomorrow if you're so interested. All right, let's talk about OCI. So we're going to start by asking a few questions. Oh, by the way, before I get into those, I failed to introduce Logesh, who's my partner here with spearmsd, who also does a lot of work with OCI, and you've seen him in his own presentations. He's joining me, simply going to be on the call as well, and we'll be able to answer a few questions at the end if we have any, and provide his thoughts on OCI and the state of PeopleSoft and OCI. So very happy to have him with me today. All right.
Cameron. No problem at all.
Yeah, sorry for not introducing you for Logesh. All right. Okay, so these are, I put together a few questions that simply provide you a context for how to think about cloud infrastructure. And you don't start with talking about cloud infrastructure, you really start with more your business needs, okay? So one of the first and most important questions to ask yourself and about your organization is, what is the state of your disaster recovery plans? Do you have actual plans for what you would do in disaster, both with in terms of physical, logical disaster, that sort of thing? What would you do if your data center was not available, and would you have any kind of plans? I hope at this point you do have some plans. Perhaps you have some kind of plan, but maybe it's not fully sufficient. More with respect to PeopleSoft, can you easily spin up temporary databases? So for example, you want to evaluate the latest image, or you have a testing effort and you need to be able to spin up a temporary database. Is that easy to do? I can remember as a employee and needing this from time to time, it wasn't always easy for my IT group to do that. And they said, well, we could do it, but which one would you like to get rid of? I mean, that was usually the question. And it was like, well, just forget it. We'll conjoin, efforts from this effort over here and that effort into one database. So that's often a struggle and a constraint for some organizations. I just mentioned this, but how do you really evaluate the latest tools release, and with respect to either features that are available in the latest tools, or specific functionality? Can you stay current on the latest PeopleSoft platform easily? 859, PeopleSoft 859 was released earlier this month. You may have heard about that. It's only released to OCI customers. So, of course, we have it up. Here's a good image of it. And a quick aside, many people are excited about the breadcrumbs coming back. I know as PeopleSoft, alongside PeopleSoft user, we're excited about the little things. So that's coming back. But point is here, 859 is available. We're already evaluating it, learning its quirks, helping identify some bugs and some things that are going to go back to Oracle to fix, so that by the time it's ready for on-prem release, it's totally available. But bottom line is, are you able to pull in the latest and greatest features to evaluate to meet those business needs? Again, another question to ask yourself. Is there organizational alignment, within your organization between the functional and IT groups and different maybe product groups or business line groups on what it really means to move to the cloud? I struggled with this a lot when I was an employee. What does it actually mean to move to the cloud, and where does it make sense for us as an organization? Do we really understand the differences between software as a service versus infrastructure as a service? And why would we go to a SaaS versus infrastructure versus a platform? And what's the difference between all these things? Oftentimes we're finding, and I know from my own personal experience, there's not alignment on what that means and where the actual value is as an organization. I put this graphic up because I think if you look at some of these things, and some of these are not business applications like Netflix or TurboTax, but if you think about some of these things, and let's take a look at Office. At one point you were installing Office on your own machine, and then perhaps that moved to a network location that you used, and now it's Office 365. And as a user, you're still using the same application. You don't really care where it exists. And so as a consumer on a Netflix or kind of a TurboTax kind of level, or if you're talking about Office 365 or Slack or Salesforce, any of these applications were quote unquote on-prem at some point, and now they're in the cloud. And really, what does that mean? What does it matter? At the end of the day, the major players are at the bottom here: Amazon, Oracle, Azure, and there's of course Google as well. But these are the major players with respect to where these applications sit. And so, at some point, as a user of the application, you don't necessarily care all that much about where it exists, as long as you can use it, as you can get value out of that application. And PeopleSoft is the same way. PeopleSoft might be on-prem right now for you, but you know, a lot of people I find are really holding on to that, and the question is, why? You're already moving with respect to other applications, already embracing the idea that your application can sit on other people's servers, but a lot of people are still holding on to PeopleSoft. So let's talk about that. So one of the things that you look at when you're talking about moving to cloud and why there's a conversation about moving to cloud is that there's a problem with capacity planning, and the cloud helps with this. If you look at the blue line here, this is traditional planning that when you're on-prem, this is typically how things work. You have originally you have a size for the right amount of capacity you need for your application, and that's fine at the beginning. Over time, your needs grow, and you find that you're under capacity, and so you may beef up the application, and now you have too much capacity again, and then your needs kind of come back down a little bit, and then they come back up. Again, you're under capacity. Well, what in the PeopleSoft world, this could be, you know, PUM maintenance, where we need to spin up multiple databases simply to evaluate PUM images. It could be a tools patch or an upgrade, where you're doing upgrade to latest 8.5.9, for example. So you need extra servers, you need extra applications. And, you know, can you do that with the capacity you have? Or to do it, do you have to overbuild the capacity? And so when you overbuild capacity, and if you're talking about cloud computing, you're really talking, you're really overpaying. You're talking about money going out the doors, and whether it's on-prem or cloud, that's what happens when you're building too much capacity. The problem is you're under capacity. You got some really upset users because your performance isn't great, and you're really struggling to meet the demands of the application. So neither one is good, and so that the real idea with cloud is to really find a very close match between your capacity and what your real need is. And being able to move up and down is really what we refer to as elasticity. Can we really build for not the future, but right now based on current needs? Can we use automated tools to monitor that capacity needs and expand if necessary? If we can get a true ROI on the move to the cloud. If we can't, we're going to be overspending on moving to the cloud. So let's talk about Oracle Cloud Infrastructure specifically. So this is a graphic, just came out April 2021. You can see some new data centers. Specifically, they've expanded to San Jose, California previously, and still the major data centers in the United States are Ashburn and Phoenix for the commercial side. I will point out that they have expanded and have this Microsoft Interconnect Azure centers, both within Ashburn and San Jose. That's great. I think they're still working through some of the kinks for that. Technically, those interconnections are there, and there's very, very fast connections between those data centers, between Microsoft's Azure data centers as well as the OCI data centers. But how that works out for PeopleSoft, I think, is still a little bit TBD. It's still more promise than actual reality. But the bottom line is, Oracle manages these data centers around the United States, around the world, and you as an on-prem organization can simply hook up your network to their network, to their data center. And when you do it with this dedicated connection between your network and their network, it essentially becomes an extension of your network. There's really, from a usability perspective, from a system perspective, from an application footprint perspective, it doesn't really make any difference. You're simply just leveraging another person's server, another organization's server, and when you do that, you really get access to a whole bunch of features that they have on their data center. This is a quick graphic, and it's a bit of an eye chart, but you can kind of see a lot of the features and functions that exist on OCI. For PeopleSoft customers specifically, you're probably not going to be taking advantage of a lot of the big data or perhaps some low code or app dev stuff, but you will potentially be using things like obviously the compute service. Those are your servers. You'll be using, of course, their storage, the networking, database as a service. Huge feature that exists on OCI that I'll be talking about here in a second, but using their database really allows you to take advantage of automated features on their database that you wouldn't necessarily have on-prem. So once you hook up your network and their network, you can access to all of these features, and they're not an individual purchase. They're simply turn it on, turn it off. You get billed for it, of course, and everything has its own costs, but you can use any of these features. There's nothing to essentially buy once you create your tenancy in OCI. And so by doing that, you can basically take advantage of all those features while still being hooked up directly to your network. And it's essentially an extension of your own network. That's what OCI is. Let's talk about specifically about PeopleSoft on OCI. So you've probably heard quite a bit about PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. Now, you do not have to run PeopleSoft Cloud Manager when you put PeopleSoft on their servers on OCI, but it's a key part of the lifecycle management and some other features. So I'm going to talk through some of those features. But you could essentially skip PeopleSoft Cloud Manager and use OCI just for infrastructure as a service. But if you think about it and really expand on this idea that once you're moving and expanding into their network, into OCI's network, you can take advantage of things that only exist on OCI. This is one of the key things in the PeopleSoft world, is PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. So what that does, PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, is it's another instance, another PeopleSoft database, essentially, that manages your other PeopleSoft databases. Okay, so you have perhaps an HCM, prod, test, dev, maybe you have a financials, prod, test, dev, maybe UAT, and your PeopleSoft Cloud Manager environment will manage those other environments. So not only the lifecycle management, being able to do the patching, all that kind of stuff, but also spinning up new environments. So taking one environment, saying, I like that dev environment, but I need a second dev environment. I like test, but I want to create a UAT for a temporary testing effort, and I want to protect everything else we're doing in this other environment. You can spin that up based on a template and basically clone one database to another, use it, spin it back down. It also does all of that backup and restore, start, stop, all of that stuff. And it's actually now becoming more and more automated. So you actually have a front end with PeopleSoft Cloud Manager that actually manages all that for you. I'm going to show you a couple of those features that exist brand new in Image 12 that came out earlier this month. Okay, so PeopleSoft Cloud Manager has all these things: lifecycle management, the ability to manage that elasticity on OCI. There's automated features. Comes with a lift and shift utility. Now you don't have to use that. You can build PeopleSoft, and there's lots of methods to bring your PeopleSoft environment onto cloud. But it does have a lift and shift utility that basically allows you to drop this utility down onto your on-prem footprint, package up your database, all your file repository, app server, web server, all those configurations, and bring it up into the cloud. So that's really great. And like I said, you do have access to early upgrades, so 8.5.9 is available, and all of those patches and PRPs, all that stuff is just automatically dropped into your environments through Cloud Manager without having to go and download it manually. It's all just there, ready to go. So let's talk. So here's an image of when you log into PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. It looks just like if you were going to log into HCM or financials and come into a fluid interface. Same kind of thing when you open up PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. You log in and you can actually see all these different tiles. And some of the latest, the stuff that's come in Image 12 is the governance feature. So I'm not going to go into a lot of the stuff around the environment template, how to clone environments. All that stuff is just there. Great. And I'm happy to talk about that as a separate conversation if you ever want to take a look at that. But I want to focus on some of the new features that have come, and I want to highlight where PeopleSoft Oracle is headed with this application and really how they view the cloud and you as a PeopleSoft customer. So in the governance tile that is now available through PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, you have all these now ability to do all these by policy, set all of these items up. So for example, I want to set up an event that when updates come in, so patches, PRPs, I want to automatically patch my environments. That's now a policy that you can just turn on. You can turn on for certain environments, not other environments. You have an always updated environment versus other ones that you want to evaluate before you move in. You can do that. If you want to schedule things, so backups and ability to scale up and scale down, to start environments, to stop environments, all of that is now just automated and can be scheduled. And it's really fantastic. So if you think about this ability and saying, okay, why would I want to scale up or scale down? Well, on a schedule, maybe you already know there's a certain time. Maybe it's a month-end close for an accounting group. Maybe it's around open enrollment. Maybe there's times of the month or times of the day where you know you need to scale up. What about starting and stopping? Well, for starting and stopping, and here we can see kind of how you go in and you can look at these policies that are already sort of there for you, and you can turn it on and add your environments, like we've added here a couple of our environments to automate this process. But by doing that and saying, I want to look for these two environments that are running, if I see that condition, I want to take this action of stop. Well, why would I do that? Well, if you think about non-prod environments, most people have your non-prod environments running 24/7. And I asked the question, why? So here you can see, this is what we did. We took some of our non-prod environments and we simply turned on the start-stop feature. And you can see this is actual cost analysis on our OCI environment. It's a very simple example for a very small environment. But you can see those green compute nodes completely turned off over the weekend, and then scale back up, come back on for when we use the environment. So we turned on for a 40-hour work week, up during work hours, bring it down after hours and on the weekends. If you're not doing this type of thing with your non-prod environments, you're simply just paying for those servers to be up, but it's different completely from on-prem. When you have on-prem, it doesn't hit you in the pocketbook. Maybe if your IT, it does. There's a functional group, an HCM group, a financials group. It doesn't cost you money to your bottom line to actually run those environments when nobody's actually using it. With PeopleSoft Cloud Manager and using the start-stop feature with this automated policy governance stuff, you can actually turn it off and you save a tremendous amount of money. Now, you can't turn off everything, okay? So for example, here you can see my block storage, my storage costs don't go away, because if I turn that off, I'm getting rid of my storage, right? So I can't turn that off, but my compute services I can turn off. Some of the other features that you would have as part of a PeopleSoft environment, you can turn off in your outside your work hours, and you should be, because you can be saving a lot of money. Okay, I want to point out that you don't have to go through all those automated controls or automated features. You can still go right into OCI. You can set up your environments. Here we have a server that was set up. All those servers are based on images. So in this case, I've created a Windows image to manage. I can't remember which one this one is, but we can take an image and say, I want to create an environment based on this image, and I can size it a certain way. If I feel that it's undersized, and there are some tools I'll show you a little bit later with the Management Cloud that can kind of monitor your performance needs. You can manually change that shape, and you can come in here and you can see right here that I've got based on the lowest, the server is based on the lowest OCPU, 1 OCPU and 8 gigabytes of memory. I can monitor that, I can watch for it, I can automate auto scaling and move that up if I need to. But right now, what I'm showing you is very simple. You just scale that up, go to a larger shape, and boom, you can go to 2 OCPUs, 4 OCPUs, etc. Okay, very easy to do, and you don't have to do it through this automation, but the automation is really fantastic because you can put it on a schedule, you can make it dependent on things that it sometimes sees, so like the auto scaling and stuff like that on OCI, where you can actually look for certain things, look for CPU thresholds, and say when it hits this sustained threshold, I need to spin up another environment and go horizontally to build another server, or I want to move that shape up from 1 OCPU to give it a little more horsepower. All of that is built based on scripting and automation. So that's where you're moving to. Okay, and all the PeopleSoft environments are taking advantage of all of these features on OCI. That's really where Oracle's headed with PeopleSoft, again, through PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. Okay, so once we talked about this, once you go on to PeopleSoft with OCI, you now have options for leveraging platform services, okay? So it's not just about the infrastructure. There are specific platform services that you can take advantage of once you move to OCI. So let's take a look at some of those key features. The first one, and probably the biggest that I'll point out, is the database as a service. Okay, so this is now your Oracle database. So if you're on SQL Server, you still have the ability to run SQL Server on OCI, but really the database cloud service is really for your Oracle databases. And the cloud service is really fantastic because it provides you basically a service that you subscribe to. So first off, we can talk about reducing potentially or eliminating your on-prem licensing for some of this. Now, you don't have to do that. You can bring your license over to OCI if you want to. If you run the numbers and it makes more sense to do that, you can do that. But we've seen a lot of people reducing or eliminating their footprint of their licensing and moving over to the cloud service. And by doing that, it's not just a licensing thing. Once you do that, you get some automated features with respect to the features that exist on this database cloud service. Yesterday, I highlighted in a different session one of our customers who moved to this service and was able to upgrade from 12.2 to 19C, and they were shocked how easy it was to do that upgrade because they were using the database cloud service. So instead of simply, and here's the other thing about this database cloud service, no need for a server. Traditionally, on-prem, you would create a server, and then on that server, you would install the database, and that database would exist on that server. And there's a requirement of making sure that database exists on the server, that has all the right specs, and that server itself is patched properly for your database. All that goes away when you move to database cloud service. You don't need a server. You simply just leverage the database cloud service. You can still access it the same way you would normally. You can use the database services and everything you would get with another Oracle database on-prem, but now you have that as a service, and it's just a much simpler process. There's autonomous being built and has been built into both the Linux operating system as well as the database. I've got another slide on that here I'll talk about in a second. But really, the move towards autonomous, and we already kind of saw that with respect to PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, with respect to how they look at building policy around sizing up, sizing down, turn it on, turn it off, applying patches. All of that is now moving towards an autonomous, automated fashion. And so that's really the key here, is that you want to eliminate or reduce the burden of keeping all of these moving parts in sync and patched up, right? So really, when we talk about Linux and autonomous database, there's some really key features, and I'll talk about, again, a little bit more in the next slide. Oracle Digital Assistant. Now, Oracle Digital Assistant is something you can use even if you don't have an OCI, even if you don't run PeopleSoft on OCI. You can use Oracle Digital Assistant, so I want to be clear about that. But I'm just highlighting that all of these features, if you create your tenancy, you're essentially buying credits, and those credits are being utilized for all this, including what would be something like Oracle Digital System one-stop shop. And again, you're just turning on that service, and it's and you're utilizing that service through that same tenancy. Load balancing. So I know in my past I've run multiple organizations that run F5 load balancers, and this is not a deep dive comparison between an F5 load balancer, but I will say that for our customers who are running PeopleSoft on OCI, there is no need to bring an F5 or to use the F5 functionality. You can use load balancing, and you can see this is a little bit of a technical chart here, but basically load balancing allows you to create redundancy between your servers, and by doing that, you can have redundancy between multiple availability domains, which allows for failover between one environment and the other, or one server and the other. So that works when you're, let's say, wanting to take one down and do some patching, whatever. You can stay up constantly. And that load balancing, not even to mention the fact that it also handles performance. So it's handling the load. All of that exists as simply a feature that you just turn on once you create your tenancy and create your PeopleSoft environment on OCI. Lastly, Oracle Management Cloud is another feature that you get. And I talked a little bit before about how you can monitor your servers and the CPU utilization, RAM, etc. Here you can see some specific dashboards that exist that are monitoring servers, okay? Now, this Oracle Management Cloud also exists and can manage or monitor servers that are on-prem as well. So again, it's not something you have to, that only works with your PeopleSoft on OCI, but I'm just pointing out that these are, again, features that you just can take advantage of, and it can monitor your OCI servers and services, as well as anything on-prem that you want to use. Again, just a built-in feature that you get access to. No need to find some best-of-breed management service, although, again, it's infrastructure, so you can run a separate management or monitoring service if you'd like to. But I'm just pointing out that you've got these options for running all of these things without a separate significant capital purchase for any of these items. So let's circle back to the autonomous thing real quick. So why would you want to go towards autonomous Linux or autonomous database? Well, the automatic, so the built-in automatic recovery, so when it finds a problem, it patches itself, it can recover itself. By doing this, you're really talking about increased system availability, especially when you're set up with that load balancing failover type situation. You will basically create a high availability situation when you can keep these things up, not 24/7. The other thing these things do is they make sure that security is basically on by default. You don't get to, the burden is no longer on you to make sure your operating system with Linux or your database is patched. The burden is on them, essentially, as Oracle, is making sure these autonomous Linux database, the OS and database are constantly patched. You don't have to be sitting there worried about the patch security patching, because they're always going to be patched. All of this really leads to reduced work effort, which means that the people that traditionally are managing the OS and managing the patching are no longer having to worry about that. They can focus on higher value, business value needs for your organization, okay? So, and again, compliance, this might become an issue with respect to your processes around doing patching for your servers or your database. This might become an audit issue for you. And so really, with ability to gain compliance for that by using this automated patching, zero downtime, you can check that box off for your auditors as well. So really some fantastic thing. There's also, I want to just sort of point out here just a little thing for you to take a look at. There's a doc ID there with a guide on how to move your database to an autonomous database. So I put that in there, as well as a couple of different blog posts from Oracle that talk about using autonomous Linux for PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, as well as PeopleSoft on autonomous database. So some good extra reading if you want to read up on those two topics. Okay, so I want to get into a little bit more nuts and bolts here of running PeopleSoft and kind of managing on OCI. So first is we're going to look at cost management. So very easy dashboard here to look at your costs. Here you can see I'm looking at one specific area, and you can see costs for broken down by my database, how much my database is costing, how much compute services I'm using, which are basically my servers, and I've got my block storage costs. And you can see some fluctuations over the course of a 6 or 7 day trend here. I can expand that out. I can get down into more details based on saying, okay, yeah, but I want to know compute services by the different compartments, non-prod versus production. I want to look at additional slicing and dicing of my costs. So you have that ability to look at those costs. You can also look at usage as well. How is our usage going? So it's not just about cost, but you can also look at usage as well. The other thing you do here with your cost management is you can create budgets. So here I've got one simple tenancy with, and I've allocated a certain amount of money towards my production compartment versus my non-production compartment. So you can see here I've got most of my money being allocated to my production compartment and non-production. Now these are not hard caps. I can do that as well, but these are essentially budgets that simply tell me, based on the already spent and the percentage of spent in period, what my forecast is for the month. And I'm simply using this as a notification to myself when I'm going to be reaching certain levels for my production or my non-production spend. Again, you want to be on top of this, because if you don't, your costs are going to go up. You're not paying attention. That can really then lead to some increased costs. And so you really want to be on top of this very closely. So here you can see I've turned on this forecast spend threshold. I say notify me when it hits this $1,000 level. And when I do that, here's my an email that will be sent to me and say, hey, FYI, you are going to hit your threshold for this month. And it's just a notification. Again, I've personalized that for myself because I wanted to know. The other thing is, I talked about how you have all these services that are available in OCI, and all of them cost different amounts of money. And once you go into real life, you might have multiple administrators in there of your tenancy. And somebody might accidentally turn something on and not really be aware of what they're doing. So it's really wise to go in and say, you know what, I appreciate Oracle that I have access to all these really fantastic services, but I'm going to actually set them off. I'm going to turn them off and say nobody can actually turn them on. And that's through this quota. Okay, so I've turned, here you can see a statement, and you can write these statements with English, and here you can see two statements. I've turned off, so I said 0 GPU compute services and 0 dense services, but I want to turn one back on for a very specific shape in one specific compartment, because somebody's going to do some training on that one thing. I can be very, very granular with that to turn that on. And once I do that, I've now, even though that my overall tenancy has 2,000 potential, as a service on my 2,000 potential servers, that's how much I have available. I've made my quota 0 for everything except for this one compartment, and I've allowed for one specific one to be turned on. Okay, very easy to write those scripts. You can upload them and turn those quotas on to stop runaway services or runaway administrators. All right, what other automated features come with OCI? Here's what a new thing called Cloud Advisor. This is actually a great tool. You don't actually have to do anything other than just turn on and look at it. And what it is a delivered tool that basically scans for inefficiencies. So in the course of a year or more, where you're running PeopleSoft or running different things on OCI, an administrator might make a mistake and have, let's say, a detached storage set of storage that was a mistake. They didn't realize it was detached. They thought at one point it was part of a server and you had some attached storage, but at some point that got stripped off and it was as a standalone. You're still paying for it because it's still there, but it's actually not actually being utilized. So this is an advisor that's telling you that you've got stuff out there that you could potentially turn off and save money. And so we turned this on. This is a real life example in our own tenancy. We looked at this and told us we had $54 of estimated savings because we had an orphaned block storage. And so here you can see it's telling me that to go delete this unattached block volume or boot volume, and that by turning that off is going to save you $54 a month. So it's a proactive artificial intelligence that says go do these things, and you're going to save some money. So you've got the recommendations, and then you can actually take actions as well. And so here we've got additional actions that I can jump into that one specifically. Said you had $54. Here's how it's broken down. Here's a couple of different areas that are at this point unattached. Review them. Maybe they should be attached. Maybe we got to go fix that. But it's telling you, hey, here's some things. Go ahead and turn them off. Get rid of them, and you can and then find that savings. One more, CloudGuard. So CloudGuard is a new feature as of 2020. This one's really fantastic. What this does is it's a security feature. And what it's doing is it has certain recipes that you can utilize that automatically detect a security breach, or maybe it's not a breach, but maybe it's a minor issue, but it's detecting specific things. It allows to either notify you, or you can take automated action if it sees certain things. So what are we talking about? So for example, suspicious IP activity. Okay, what if you have a server that is exposed to the internet and it's getting hit from a very suspicious IP, and it knows about this and it's going to track this. You can get into the details about how the logic of how this works, but essentially this recipe that you can utilize will detect a whole range of specific things it's looking for. It'll mark that as a critical, and you can actually attach that then to a response, an automated response. So if I see this, go ahead and shut that down. And that's what this is saying. It's saying if it sees that suspicious IP activity, delete that specific IAM policy, which is giving too many privileges. And so by turning this stuff on, you're letting the system work for you versus creating these potential breaches or risk that you're going to have to manage yourself. You're actually asking the system to manage that for you, and then essentially notify you. Now you got to be careful about this, because you don't want to turn this on too much, because you might be dropping, John over there who's actually trying to access from his own home computer or something like that. So you have to, obviously play with this and make sure it's doing what you want. But these are great features that, and before I move off of this, I just really want to reiterate this point that Oracle is really investing in the features that you're going to be able to run with PeopleSoft on OCI. And that's really the key here, is to be able to understand that it's not just about PeopleSoft Cloud Manager. You have some specific things that, and people, trust me, PeopleSoft Cloud Manager is great. You may have heard, well, it's not cracked up, you have to do things manually, whatever. That may have been true in the past. It's moving now to a very, very robust application that can really manage your PeopleSoft environments, and you have all these other great features of the platform. So it's really, really something that is fantastic, something that should be considered. So I've got a couple minutes left here, and I'll just sort of walk through a success story of our a customer that we run. We leverage our PeopleSoft on OCI CloudShift product, which is essentially just our way of saying we work with you to look at your needs analysis, planning, sizing, pricing. We can help you move your environment, or in some cases, and what I'll share in a second, is actually moving off of a non-PeopleSoft environment onto PeopleSoft, directly onto OCI. We can, of course, do the hosting, PeopleSoft Cloud Manager, and then we take care of the full life cycle if you want us to. We can do the managed services for you as well. So we do have one customer that I wanted to highlight that was on a SaaS product. It was not an Oracle product, but they had a financial SaaS solution that really was not performing well, and had lack of security, lack of reporting. They did not have any interest for on-prem servers. They had no PeopleSoft expertise, although had exposure to PeopleSoft and wanted to use it, but they didn't really want to build out a robust team on-prem. They didn't want to really have a system administrative function. They just want to be users of the system. So in 4 months, we took them from nothing to fully live with production on PeopleSoft. And that wasn't a move from on-prem PeopleSoft to the cloud. It was, they had nothing, no PeopleSoft environment at all. Took them off of their old environment onto PeopleSoft. And we could only do that really with OCI, because we were able to spin up the servers automatically. There was no procurement of servers and shipping of the servers and installation and configuration. It was none of that. You just turn on the servers, you start doing your demonstrations and training, gather requirements, you start mapping. And in this case, we mapped to 100% delivered functionality. using configurable enhancements. You can choose to just simply build out a DR plan, which is what we did for them, connect it to your own network, and then go live. And I'm very happy to say that this customer had a very uneventful go live, which is exactly the kinds of go lives I like to have. At the end of the day, you're talking about time-saving consolidated reporting, streamlined approval process, stringent internal controls, all of the things that they consider value add. You'll notice that they didn't, and these were from them. Like, what did you think? What do you like about PeopleSoft OCI? They told me all the things that they liked about the feature functionalities of the application. They weren't really hung up on the application or the technology, the servers itself, because they don't think of it that way. They think of themselves as a user of the application. The same exact way as I started the whole conversation about using Office 365 or using Netflix as a consumer, or using TurboTax or Slack or one of these other products. You're not figuring out where that application is going to sit and who's going to manage the application behind the scenes. You're just using the system. And that's what these guys are able to now do. Of course, with our managed services, we do have SLA-driven system administration for them with patching and maintenance. We do functional support for them. And we really partner with them to help them manage their own applications. So the only thing they have to do internally with their IT staff is reset people's passwords. That's it. They didn't want to do anything more than that, and we were fine with that. We support them. And really, running PeopleSoft is pretty, once you kind of strip off some of that back-end stuff that you got to do with on-prem, you start to use more automated features, you don't need you don't need a lot of people to manage PeopleSoft. And so they were able to do that, and they were finding it to be quite advantageous for them. So a few minutes left. I'm going to just run through a couple of my thoughts on the conclusion, and I'm going to let Logesh jump in here and see if he has some thoughts as well as on some of the top reasons to consider OCI. So for PeopleSoft, so the first one I'm going to point out is the lifecycle management. So the automated patching, the automated ability to spin up new environments, the automation around spinning up, spinning down, that lifecycle management and the elasticity are really something that you have. It's really a game changer for running PeopleSoft within OCI. The ability to manage your costs really closely and to keep that very, very tight, moving more towards OpEx versus your CapEx, which might be advantageous for you. Simply, aligning the costs with the use of the application versus this pool of CapEx costs that traditionally is how IT functions. The integration of platform services, I mentioned 4 or 5 different platform services, with the database cloud service, the cloud advisor, the cloud guard, all these platform services that you now just get access to once you leverage OCI, really a game changer for OCI over some of those other platforms like Azure and AWS, who have other services, but they're not necessarily integrated into the PeopleSoft footprint the way OCI and PeopleSoft pair. A disaster recovery. If you don't have a very robust DR strategy within for PeopleSoft on-prem, leveraging a secondary region within OCI, as I showed you with those regions, you can put that secondary DR environment on a secondary region and have that as a robust backstop for you. Lastly, security. Built-in security into PeopleSoft and OCI is very strong, and as I pointed out, there's some automation around that as well with the Cloud Guard that allows you to actually, in an automated fashion, watch for security breaches and shut it down before it becomes a problem. So those are kind of top 6 for me, top 6 reasons. I'm going to ask Logesh to jump in here, and I'll ask you, Logesh, if you have other reasons to consider OCI, but really, if you have any other comments on the entire presentation, now's the time.
Absolutely. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Excellent. It was a great summary of making a strong and a very detailed case for the cloud infrastructure, Cameron. Thank you very much. I think a couple of items I want to add, more from a strategy point of view. I think though it's still fairly early stages, but the cloud OCI and the OCI conversations with the PeopleSoft customers has been around for a while now, 3, 4 years now, and we can see a general shift in in those conversations in a way that the move to OCI, as you explained earlier, for PeopleSoft customers, it has always been a conversation with the technical IT related folks, where who ends up making a decision on where the application should be running. But over time now, we are seeing there is a lot of business value, and as you kept reiterating throughout the session, where business folks are seeing there is a lot more value and they see a huge opportunity to make this move happen now. For instance, many of the items that were constraints due to internal infrastructure limitations, when they want to liberate some functionalities, like it could be Kibana Analytics, it could be Elasticsearch, it could be PeopleSoft test frameworks, where customers need additional capacity or additional environments and were limited with the internal server capacities, they see this move as an opportunity to unshackle those items. So definitely there is a big push also happening from the business side, where they see a lot of opportunity. And not just that, many customers are also thinking about potential changes in terms of their architecture, addressing some of changing some of the older ways things were done. For example, applications not generally made available outside the network for access, enabling public internet access for certain areas like self-servers, making those things much easier. So they're thinking about those sort of aspects as part of this migration or movement to cloud as well. And one of the biggest areas that you touched upon, where moving the applications from on-premise to cloud also opens up a lot more possibilities about integrating with various other cloud um, PaaS systems, like platform as service system. One great example is the um, Oracle Digital Assistant for chatbot services, both running on Oracle Cloud infrastructure makes things a lot more easier. And as you said, also about the collaboration with Microsoft and ability to integrate with uh, Microsoft Active Directory authentication and so forth. So there is now a lot more interest from the business community with all the opportunities they see with this cloud migration. So it's not just anymore an infrastructure related conversation, but what are all the various business values it offers. So it's a big case point for that as well. So I just want to wrap up with that.
Yeah, thanks, Logesh. I appreciate your thoughts there. I just point out, if you have any questions, so we're at the end of our presentation, so if you have any questions, I don't think there's an ability to actually speak through a microphone. So you have to put it in, go ahead and put it into the chat window, or we also have a Q&A section that we can monitor as well. So I'll give it a minute or so to, if you have any questions, go ahead and write those in. In the meantime, Logesh, I know for myself, I'm really excited about what I'm seeing in Cloud Manager 12 with respect to the policy features around governance and the automation of the scaling up and scaling down, and the ability to do backups, the ability to patch by as an event. As soon as it sees the patch, go ahead and roll those in. What excites you about kind of where Oracle's headed with their roadmap?
I think the biggest one for me in Cloud Manager 12 that caught my eye is the support to work with autonomous database, ability to deploy PeopleSoft and manage with autonomous database, and also more importantly for public sector and government customers, the support for government cloud region, which it may opens up a huge potential there for large PeopleSoft customers who are in the public sector government institutions to run and automatically manage their instances on OCI using Cloud Manager. So I think those two are the biggest highlights for me. Thanks for that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's huge. I mean, the ability to bring in automation. I think we heard a little bit yesterday from Dave Bain, or sorry, it was a Monday, around you know, you can see exactly where they're headed, and I love that they brought in the by policy be able to spin up, or I should say, turn on or turn off, you know, compute services or turn off PeopleSoft environments. I love that they did that on a schedule. What I'm looking for next is for them to link that to other AI platforms. And as Dave mentioned, the wiring is there. They're capturing the right information. Simply turning that into essentially an algorithm that you can turn on, where it's either scaling up on an automated fashion, scaling down, turning it on, you know, starting and stopping, all of that using more AI. I think that's where we're headed. So right now it's a schedule, so we can do it that way. But being able to, for example, scale up in an auto fashion through Cloud Manager is great. We've had auto scaling through OCI for a while. That's been available for a while, but you know, having that available now through Cloud Manager, I think, is where they're headed. And I'm super excited about some of that AI that they're building into it. All right, so we are at the end of our time. I don't see any specific questions coming through the chat or the Q&A. I will end it there. My information's here, email address, phone number. Happy to chat if you'd like to chat about any of this. If you'd like to see PeopleSoft 859 or how PeopleSoft Cloud Manager works, all of that stuff we can set up private demos for you in your organization. Very happy to do that and talk through that. I do have a couple of other items in the appendix if you want to pull the deck, just some other sort of background on you know, what some of the services are in OCI and some of the other features. So with that, I'm going to end the presentation and thank everybody for attending. And we look forward to talking more with you at some point. So thanks a lot.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.